Jill, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm excited to dive in today with you.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to it, and I think this is going to be one of our most practical and tactical episodes, which I'm excited about. Before we dive in to our topic and what we're going to cover today, could you just give the quick background on yourself and some of the work that you do today?
Sure. My name is Jill Dunchick. I have been working in the world of education and with people and with leaders for the last, I think it's 28 years. I am currently located in New Orleans, Louisiana. As you can see, my family love of the artwork behind me, all things New Orleans, Louisiana. Most of my professional career, I have lived in New Orleans, Louisiana, but my work had started here and then was based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for about 6 years, and then have worked across the country probably for the last 15 years. My roles, I served as a special education teacher in general education classroom or school, and then in an alternative setting went on to become an assistant principal of instruction, have background in reading specialist, and then went on to become a principal and do turnaround work in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. After that, I worked as the executive director for new schools development down here in New Orleans, Louisiana, and then worked for Building Excellent Schools for about 9 years before starting my own company of leadership development. And I'm going on 5 years this year, which is really hard to believe. I sort of had a moment this morning where I was like, holy cow, like, can't believe it's been 5 years. But very fortunate to be doing the work I love and organizing it in ways that I love and working with people to really make a difference in their jobs. On a personal side, I am a mother of a 20-year-old daughter who is finishing her exams right now for sophomore year.
Shout out to her getting through the exams. Yep.
Shout out to her, and then shout out to both of us trying to still figure out how we're getting everything from Syracuse, New York down to New Orleans, Louisiana in 2 weeks.
Sounds like a fun road trip, maybe.
It is, and it keeps changing up. We might stop at Dollywood, which kicks up some of the other things that I love doing. I've done bulldog rescue here in Louisiana for the last 20 years. So if you hear snoring, that is a French bulldog within arm's reach, and he's an active part of all things my life. And then I'm involved in something called the Crew of Fleurs, where we work towards a sustainable Mardi Gras, and then also the Crew of Dolly, which is really exciting. We bring joy to the community dressing up like Dolly Parton, but more importantly, we just launched the Imagination Library across the whole city of New Orleans, which is Dolly Parton's free books for kids ages 0 to 5.
I am a subscriber. I'm a huge fan. Yeah, I didn't know
Oh,
you.
yay!
Yeah, I didn't know you did that. That's awesome. Yeah, the Imagination Library is incredible. If you're unfamiliar with this, I'm going to go on a rant as a user because I have two young boys. They send you a book every single month. It's amazing, and they send it in English and Spanish, and it's like all the classic best childhood books that you remember as a kid. It's incredible. It's all free, funded by Dolly Parton's foundation. It's amazing. So, and they have different chapters in different cities. They do it in Richmond, Virginia, where I'm hosted or based. So that's amazing. I didn't know you did that, and it's an awesome program.
Yeah, so if you go to my website, and that's something, you'll see some photos of me dressed up like the best Dolly Parton that I can be. I could never do it, but in full gear, but I try my best, but really love the what would Dolly do spirit. I bring it into everything, and I'm chairing literacy. So the books go free to families. On the back end, I'm managing a budget and making sure that we are growing and able to sustain the program. In its first year will cost, I think it's about $20,000 for our organization. So we've raised a bunch of money since 2022 to be covered for about 2 to 3 years. So very exciting work, love doing it, and brings together my love of literacy, my love of costuming in the city, and, who doesn't need a little bit of what would Dolly do spirit running through their veins?
Yeah, we should. I mean, this has nothing to do with our topic, but we should have had we could have had you dress up as Dolly for this episode. It would have been amazing. Awesome. Well, I appreciate the personal and professional background, and as you mentioned, you spent a number of years embedded in schools, working in leadership roles, also working with BES. A lot of people are familiar with BES, launching new schools all across the country, working with founders, supporting their operational launch. And one of the things you mentioned your practice today is working with leaders and doing leadership development. one of the things that is really hard about leadership is just building an effective team and getting that team to operate efficiently. So, what we're going to be talking about today is sort of two core aspects of building an effective operations team. The first being building trust on your team, and the second being basically organizing your people and having regular meetings and check-ins. So that's going to be our deep dive today. And I thought we could start with the first one, which is a little more, I don't know, maybe ephemeral or a little harder to grasp, which is building trust amongst your team. And I wanted to kick us off by having you talk a little bit about Brene Brown's braving framework, because I know this is something you are passionate about. So could you maybe kick us off there and talk a little bit about, one, maybe why building trust is so critical to effective teams, and then walking us through the braving framework?
Sure. And just as like one step up from there is the framework for the way I work with ops teams falls under the formula of people plus systems plus cohesion is going to get you your results. So the trust really comes in around people and cohesion. And when you have that, you can increase people's trust within themselves to produce at a level, and then their trust within their teammates to produce and show up at a level. And as such, that helps to increase the cohesion. I love the braving framework because trust is such an ambiguous word. Trust is like respect. And I often use the example, my best friend from high school was from Italy. If I walked into her house and didn't go right to the refrigerator or right to what was on the stove, her mother would have seen it as a huge sign of disrespect. And, and if I walk into some people's house and go right to their stove or right to their refrigerator, that would be a sign of disrespect. And to me, trust is similar. So trust and the braving inventory are based on the definition that Charles Feltman is known for. And that definition is trust is choosing to make something that is important to me vulnerable to the reactions or actions of someone else. And if we think about showing up for work and putting our best work effort forward, we are constantly putting something that is important to us vulnerable to the reactions of someone else, ideally our boss or the people that we're serving in ops. And that still doesn't help us to build trust within our teams, but it does get at like why it is important. So Brene, as a researcher, came up with what she calls the braving inventory, and it stands for boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. Most people in ops have a high level of reliability, and that's the ability to produce something at a level within a given time. And what we see in ops people who move up the ops ranks quickly is that they are very reliable people.
Right. Doers of the work. Yep. They like to get stuff done.
Producers of the work. Yep. And so that's often a place where ops leaders will say, oh, okay, but there's more. They'll begin to realize there's more to why they trust people than just that reliability. And when I do this work with ops teams in particular, that's usually where the conversation goes. Oh, okay. Now they start to realize and we do activities where we explore the definitions of each of those 7 parts of braving. And then we analyze both ourselves on those 7 aspects, and then we analyze ourselves within teams. And it presents a very safe way to begin to see which of these aspects are high on the team and where we need to work either one-to-one with certain people on the team or where we need to work as a whole.
So you mentioned like reliability of the different ones you talked through: boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. You mentioned ops people tend to be high on the reliability side. And obviously, every team is a little bit different. But in your experience of some of those other elements, what are some of the ones that maybe are trickier to cultivate, or maybe more commonly not as prevalent amongst our ops friends?
Yep. Generosity, and not from a malice intent, but generosity is I am coming to evaluate or be in relationship to something you've produced, and I'm giving you the best benefit, like this is the best that you can do, the benefit of the doubt. And in ops, where most of my leaders struggle, or the thing that they'll come to a meeting and say is, I was really clear about where the book bins needed to go. I was really clear about the attendance count. I made sure I told them how to organize this closet. And the generosity piece, we begin to explore it by saying, okay, but, and Brene's got another frame she uses in the text called paint done. I don't use that as much working with people, but she says, like, how are we painting done? And for many ops people, we realize, like, hey, a photo of what they were talking about would have been far more helpful on the front end to their people. Actually going and modeling for 5 minutes and then coming back in 2 days to check. So it's that place where they catch themselves in generosity, thinking they were clear on what they explained. And we begin to look at oh yeah, photo would have been helpful. Actually, probably should have went there and modeled for 5 minutes. Oh, probably should have asked them to send me a photo when they had 2 rows done, right? So just little ways that we can save time and make sure that we are communicating on the front end the level at what we're expecting, so that when we go to see the finished product as ops leaders, it matches that of what, of what we thought we were communicating.
I think this is such an important point because, as you mentioned, a lot of ops people who rise in the ranks because they're really good at their job, right? They're good, they're reliable, they get stuff done, they get it done quickly, they're asking for more, and because they're good at their job, when they do get promoted into a management position, they're thinking, I must also be good at management because I'm inherently good at getting stuff done. And for any of us who've been managers, you quickly realize that's not the case, and management is a learned skill. And so it sounds like what you're saying is one of the really important things is taking a step back and evaluating like the status of the team, but also yourself as a manager, how you're communicating, how you're supporting your team. Is there trust amongst the team? You mentioned going through an exercise to evaluate kind of each of these components of the Braving framework. Do you encourage teams to do that together, or is this like a self-reflective thing for an ops manager to do in thinking about their team?
Run it both ways with folks.
Okay.
And if you bring me in to work with you, I will absolutely do this with your team, and have you do it first for yourself individually and then share out, and then we do it with the team. What's important when we do this work with team is setting up the psychological safety. So I think that's sometimes really hard, especially if you're new to management, to know how to have people do really accurate evaluations and analysis of, do I actually think Daniel's reliable? Oh, yes. Do I think Daniel, keeps what I'm saying in confidence? Yes. Do I give Daniel the benefit of the doubt when he does something? Oh, I don't do that, right? Or do I feel like Daniel gives me the benefit of the doubt? I don't feel like he does that. It's really hard to do if you're sitting with your team and then ask the right questions afterwards. But I do recommend that if you're comfortable doing it, it's worth taking a shot at it. But it is really easy to hire someone like me to come in. Well, maybe it's not easy, but if you're open to it, someone to come in and work with your team, even for 4 hours on something like this, can have dramatic positive impacts because it gives you a path forward. And so the questions that I'll ask a team after, if I've got a group of 10 people and we've all done an analysis of the team, I'll say, okay, if you have marked, 7 out of your 10 people reliable, raise your hand. And so we go around and we count. We don't ask who those people are. We ask how many hands are up. And if I've got 10 people in the room, I don't know if I just changed my denominator, but 10 people in the room and 7 of them raise their hand, we can call that a strength for the team. The team feels like they're reliable. And so I'll just take another one, totally making it up, integrity. And I say, if you've got 7 or more people checked with integrity, raise your hand. And I only see 3 hands come up, then the team knows as a whole, integrity is a place for them to explore, to move their cohesion forward, to get sort of that energetic cohesion so that the work can continue to produce at the speed it needs to produce. So I think I recommend teams doing it individually, definitely. And then I do recommend doing it as a team and potentially bringing in an outside facilitator, because it is extremely powerful when you start to unearth, what are the things that the team can build on, like
Right.
reliability, and then, hey, how do we work on integrity? And those are things that are not quick fixes. They're things that you implement into your other structures, such as one-on-ones and huddles, to kind of continue to build something like integrity.
Okay, well, that's a good segue into talking about how you do this on an ongoing basis. Before we jump into team meetings and huddles and kind of the cadence of engaging your team as a leader, knowing that this is ongoing work, is there anything shorter term that a leader could do this week, next week, over the next 30 to 60 days to be more intentional about cultivating trust amongst their team? Could be strengthening an aspect of the braving framework, but are there any sort of, I guess, maybe low hanging fruit recommendations you would have for an ops leader that's thinking, ooh, we definitely have opportunities in the trust category amongst our team where they could start, right away?
I would say if you just Google Brene Brown braving, you'll get, great braving and YouTube, you'll get several options for like 10-minute videos to watch. So I would say watch the video or read the text, parts from Dare to Lead on the braving inventory, and then just do a self assessment. Check where, what's in, which of the aspects of braving are most important to you for trusting a person. And are there some that aren't? And then explore for the next week how this shows up for you at work.
Perfect. Okay. Love it. All right. So let's talk about meetings. I think everybody, most people despise meetings. Let's be honest. Generally, if people can avoid a meeting, they're happy to avoid that meeting. But meetings are critical to running effective teams. It's how organizations, get things done. It's how projects move from point A to point D. Can you talk us through, you kind of have 3 different meetings that you alluded to that you think ops teams should be doing. Can you talk us through each of those and why you think they're essential for an operations team or really any department team?
Sure. So just you said meetings are essential to moving the work, and I would just say intentional meetings are
Mm.
essential for moving the work. I've never read the text Death by Meeting, but I know I have lived that text.
Yeah, I think we all have.
And so if we look under the system of people, or the formula of people plus systems plus cohesion equals results, intentional meetings or times when we are face to face with our team really begins to hit at the systems and the cohesion so that we can begin to move the work forward. In ops, I think there are 3 different ways you want to be growing your team. The first would be what I would call an ops team meeting, however you want to frame it. Ideally, if you are an organization with, one site, and you're an ops lead of a school that's one site, I would say this is a weekly meeting that is 60 minutes long. And the intentionality of this meeting is to inform everyone of the major tasks that are going on. I like to look in ops at a weekly, monthly, and 3-month calendar while always keeping our annual calendar in the back of our head. This is time, when used well, to get support on position specific projects. So if you use like a MOCA or a RACI or some kind of framework where you might be the owner and other people are giving input, it's great to have about 15 minutes in this 60 to be the owner and to get some feedback on said project. It's also time for everyone to work on that, do their aspects to that that project that they're working on. As the leader of this meeting, you're keeping an ear to the rail to see who needs support and what you need to begin putting on your, what I'll get to, which is the third piece, which is one-on-one agendas. So you'll begin to see where, who needs support and who's not able to kind of carry their weight within the group on a given project. This sounds basic, but what often happens in ops meetings is the op leader just begins to speak over and telling people what to do. So they don't actually get to see where the deficit is. So it's a skill to kind of have that 15 minutes and hold back and kind of make sure you're evaluating where your team is in their ability to produce on this project. And you don't let anybody make a really wrong left turn, but you also don't use that time to talk over and do the work for that person. And then it's just a great time to do some natural team building, and where needed, last thing is like provide the connection between some of the work that can sometimes seem siloed in ops, which I think is an oversight that most ops leaders have, where they don't make the connections between how the ops assistant work is like, coming into facilities or something. And then the other two would be a huddle, which I think is important for ops leaders, and then a one-on-one. I'll go to one-on-one next. Depending on the size of your team and people's roles, I would think, again, a single site. You're either meeting weekly or every 2 weeks with most of the people who report to you. I don't think you can go monthly. I don't know, maybe if you're responsible for the nurse or something, you can go monthly, but weekly or biweekly, again, 30 to 60 minutes. Not every meeting needs to be 60 minutes. So it's important to use your time well. This is general status updates, again, on that one, like 1 week, 1 month, 3-month timeline, as well as annual calendar back of the mind. So it may come up. This is skill building for the coachee, and then feedback. We often, especially in ops more than others, we just get things done and we don't say, hey, that went really well. Next time, let's take 2 minutes. What would you write down? What went well? Write down what you would fix. And then you also are doing that. And then you allow the person to share out what went well and what they would fix. And then from here, you can get from your person that you're working with, your coachee, what do they think needs to be incorporated in the team agenda? And then you can agree, disagree, or add. And then lastly is huddles. Huddles are like quick hits. I would say they're daily. For daily or every other day is sort of where I go for a single site team. Under 15 minutes. To me, 10 is ideal. And this is the part where if done well, it can cut down on what I see happening now, which is like overkill on the Slack or WhatsApp or whatever. There's like 800 messages in 3 hours.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, this is done. Oh, did you get this? Oh, whatever. It's if you have those huddles and they go well, you can build the trust up that if I know that I have these 3 things on my punch list for today, they'll be done. And I don't have to update you every time I do one of those 3. And therefore consider that, figure 2 messages for every 1 task times 2 people. That's 4 messages we can cut down. So really trying to, just have that space to get the work done. And then just, fun check-ins as well can happen in ops, but 10 to 15 minutes max. So those are 3: team meetings, one-on-ones, and then ops team huddle.
Okay, perfect. So I love having the 3 different types of meetings because I think that's really clear and actionable. Let's unpack each of these a little bit more for folks who might be interested in implementing something like this or adapting their own meetings. I think a lot of people probably have semblances of each of these, but maybe there's not a cohesive kind of cadence structure approach to them. Let's start with the full team meeting. You mentioned you kind of drew the distinction between meetings and intentional meetings, which I think is a good clarification. Beyond, like when I think about intentional meetings, I think the first thing that jumps into my head is, oh, there needs to be an agenda, because the old adage is if there's no agenda, then you shouldn't have the meeting. But beyond just setting an agenda, what are some things that, and you alluded to a few of these, but what are some things that make that full team meeting really valuable for actually aligning different folks on the team on larger projects like you mentioned, or developing them as team players? Like what are some things that make a great operations team meeting versus kind of a mediocre meeting where everyone's looking at the clock and thinking, oh, I can't wait for this to be done?
Yep. So I have always done this, and I feel like I feel like it, like a pendulum, everything swings. And then I feel like there's been times where I've gotten a lot of pushback on this idea, but I create all of my agendas. So if I am the leader, I am responsible for the frame of that agenda. And I believe that that is true across the board. I'll have people say, no, Jill, I want my person to create the agenda because then I know what they need support with. And I say, no, because you are the holder of excellence. So you need to have the framework. Now, I want for them to co-create the agenda, which means I've created a framework of the agenda. And it's important that I mail that or email that out, ideally 3 days, but on my, if I go 2 days or one day, I always apologize for the delay. And then I expect, they won't be able to input as much. But 3 days before, and if you work with me now, you know this, I do my calendar on Thursday, and then I'm either doing my agenda Thursday afternoon or Friday morning. That's the latest. And I send to everyone, here is a draft agenda. Feel free to add or delete. And if there's something that somebody needs to bring or that I know I want to spend time on, I'll say, notice I've highlighted the summer PD schedule. Be sure to have that. Or I might say, you were working on the project plan for parent info night. Please have that almost like 100% completed for feedback. So just a little bit of a ting in terms of where we're actually going to work together to make this not just a meeting that could have been an email, but an intentional meeting where I actually grow my person. So co-creating the agenda is important. And then making sure that I'm doing my prep for whatever it is that I have in there. This is the place where this goes across all coaching. If you're strong at the thing that you need to work with the person on, like a summer PD schedule or whatever, you don't have as much prep time. But if you have a new data entry system and you're not strong in it, you may need to sit back for a half hour and make sure you can run the reports efficiently and effectively so that you're not stumbling with your coachee. There's a difference between working together and wasting time for your coachee. So making sure that if there's prep work you need to do, that you're doing that beforehand. And then I teach a skill regardless of the agenda that you use called work time and go first. And I think we have it a little bit later on to talk about, but no matter what your agenda is, if it's really a meeting, there needs to be some time where your coachee is doing what we call the heavy lifting on the instructional side, or we call it building ratio on the instructional side. It's how do we get the learner to do the work? And the strategy that I teach is called work time and go first.
Okay, great. Well, I want to come back to that. So, but before we get to work time and go first, let's jump over to one-on-one. So you gave some great recommendations for the team meetings. Kind of same question for one-on-ones. I mean, one-on-ones are obviously, a safer space for certain conversations. There's kind of inherent boundaries in a one-on-one conversation. How do you feel like leaders can effectively balance checking in on specific tasks with coaching, professional development, personal items that maybe come up in one-on-ones? I think just speaking personally, I know myself as a manager, it's easy for me to default in one-on-ones to just be like super focused on the work that needs to get done and checking in on the projects. And this is on your to-do list. How's this going? Like, what do you need? Yada, yada. And then the one-on-one will be over and we didn't get to anything else. And I've then monopolized that time for my own agenda, which is trying to make sure things are getting done. So how can leaders kind of maximize that one-on-one time?
Regardless of the structure or the template that you use, I think there's three key components, and I would say that these are three key components of every one-on-one
Okay.
position, regardless of position. But in ops, sometimes we need to make all three of these intentional, just because the best way possible ops people are made. So in every one-on-one, there needs to be time for authentic connection. And this is sometimes really much harder for an ops person to do, and to put it in an agenda is like, kind of mind blowing. The second piece is what you're alluding to, which is there is a lot of work to move at a very fast pace. So you do need to have a substantial part of your agenda around moving work. And that's for ops, like why I always like to keep a 1 week, a 1 month, a 3 month framework as really a part of this agenda. And then the third part is where we're actually growing people. Consider it your, your one-on-one professional development or your ability to set the bar and give feedback. But this is where we're working to build the ratio, have the ops person learning from our expertise as opposed to us just telling them how to do the thing well. So those are the three main components. And this authentic connection one, it's lived, and I work with people when they bring me in to do this type of work. Like first we analyze their current agenda, like what aspects of their agenda fit those three buckets, what aspects of those three buckets do they feel like they can do authentically, and then how do we like take away or reorganize aspects of their agenda that don't grow the person, move the work forward, and allow for authentic connection. And then the other thing that I think is important is for some people, they try to put that authentic connection in the beginning, and sometimes it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it's like play around with, for me, I love being in the work with people. So I'll connect a lot in the work. But for me, authentic connection usually happens towards the last, like I'll ask how people are doing on the front end, but the real authentic is like towards the last quarter of the meeting. So for some people, we put that authentic connection in the last 10 minutes.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a helpful tip. It's kind of like when you go to a conference and they say like, okay, now everyone stand up and get to know each other. It's like, okay, this is forced. It's awkward. I'm just saying hi to people and shaking their hand, and it's not authentic. And it's kind of the same idea.
Yeah, but it's like for me, I was doing a retreat last week, and I just said to one of the things when we're trying to build cohesion, it's like increase play. And I was with someone who I had worked with before and someone who I hadn't, and we set up the space and we had a short amount of time. It was awesome. Like I was like, this is fun for me to be like, oh, you say you're going to do the waters, and you and I know what waters look like. So to be in that work together. So if we're checking off the to-do lists or whatever, and we have all that happening, we're already starting to build cohesion. So when I turn around and ask a question to connect, there's already some cohesive energy that I'm building from.
Okay, so let's round out these three types of meetings with huddles. We've got team meetings, we've got one-on-ones, and we've got huddles. You mentioned those huddles can be a really great way to cut down on sort of the ever running Slack messages or the opposite, which is like no one talking and then everyone wondering what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how these can be effectively used. Should these be, I guess, my own personal questions that jump to mind are like, is this ad hoc and you schedule these as needed? Are these cadenced and on the calendar?
Yeah, when you start to keep these ad hoc, you'll decrease their effectiveness. So to help ops move from just the punch list one-on-one meetings, if you have regular huddles, your punch list will be getting touch points. And like I said, every other day, I think is important for an ops team. If you're doing a facility renovation, probably every day. If you are changing data systems, probably every day, until you get to until the thing that is happening is in a stable place. And then I still think it's every other day. The pace and cadence of ops is fast. One small move can wreck many larger systems. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important to keep these to your time frame. I like a 10-minute ops meeting. I like it to be sort of checklist driven. And it doesn't always have to be the same time of day, but the consistency needs to be like the time limit of 10 minutes a day, and we keep it.
Perfect. Okay. I think that's very helpful. I want to shift us to some specific coaching moves because you do this full time, but any manager is also a coach. You alluded to something you call work time and go first as an example of a coaching strategy. Could you unpack that for us a little bit? And then maybe we can talk about one or two other coaching strategies before we come to a close.
Sure. So my framework for working with people is constantly gauging stress. So most of us know, and when we hear of stress, we think of bad stress, which is distress. And most people are shocked when I tell them that there is actually a word in the English language that means good stress. And that word is eustress, EUSTRSS, the good stress. And I work with and help my coachees to analyze themselves for where they are on this bell curve in terms of eustress being optimal performance in the middle of the bell curve, and distress being on, most of us are aware of it in terms of like the hyper distress when someone's in that level of distress. But there's also the physiological distress of shutdown, where you're so overwhelmed that you almost appear frozen. And many managers will look at their folks in that level of distress and say, oh, that's a will gap. Oh, they don't want to do this. And so first and foremost is, some self-awareness for yourself around, where am I in this moment in terms of a distress, eustress cycle? And where is the person I'm working with? Because then that allows me, if I am to the best of my ability, not labeling, but assessing that they're in good stress and in eustress, that helps me decide how to move the meeting forward. So within that scale of distress, eustress, you are working with someone one-on-one, and the goal is to get them to do the work. And that's why I say you take your one-on-ones, and you should have at least 15 minutes in a 60-minute meeting where the ratio, the heavy lifting is done by the coachee. And the strategy that we use is called work time and go first. So work time, most of you probably use. And that's where if you're doing this at all, you'll say, okay, you have the parent report card conference coming up next Thursday. Let's take 3 minutes and write down everything you need at the front desk so that every parent can get their report card and head right to where they need to go. And so both of us will work. I, as the coach, will also be working. This is where, when we go back to agenda creation, we say, do your work. If you've never done a progress report night, you as the coach have work to do before you come to this meeting. But if you've done 400 of these, you probably can just sit there and rattle off in 3 minutes every move you need to make. And so you do the work time, 3 minutes is up. And here's the strategy of a strong coach. You'll use the go first. You'll either offer to the coachee, you'll say something like, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first on the share out? You can also do the make the coachee go first, and there's a reason and intentionality behind that. Or you can say to the coachee, you're going to go first. And being conscious of why you would use each of those three as a coach is what separates you from creating a do it my way versus a psychologically safe environment for learning for the coachee. So go first. I'm pretty strong in what I wrote. I'm fairly certain I'm strong in what they wrote. I'm okay whoever goes first. If they choose to go first, then I'll just either set the bar for them, agree with them, or kind of give some pushes. If I am, what did I do second? If I'm making them go first, there's 2 reasons I'm doing that. And let's just assume the positive here. One is I'm trying to build their confidence. They're always wanting me to go first. So I might say, hey, Daniel, I'm going to have you go first. You can definitely write down anything I might add to it, but I really think you have this. So I want you to go first. And that just helps build confidence. And then if the person's not confident, they'll be like, all right, but I'm really not confident about my ending. And I say, great, let's just see where you are. But the more that they've done the work and that I can be the reflection in this intimate moment that they're on point or not, the more they're going to be able to do the work when I'm not with them, the less Slack messaging I'm going to need later on, because they're already going to know that they've met my bar or not. And then third is I go first. It's like we've worked for 3 minutes and I see they've got 2 things written down. I'm like, oof. And I might even end that early if I see them. I'm like, all right, I'm going to write mine down. And then I want you to, build from that. So again, all 3 of those make it safe. When you think you know what you want to get some reflection, when we want to build their confidence, and when they don't have anything to produce. But it's set up the work time, with which a lot of people do. That conscious who goes first is where a lot of people, that's where it's a lot of fun to grow, to hear back from people.
Awesome. Okay. So we've got work time and go first, super tactical strategy, something everyone can use this week. Let's do.
I say the cycles for that, y'all, you can do a 30-second cycle. A 30-second work time is extremely powerful. And I often say it's kind of like a spiral. If you think about it, it's not one work time. It's like 2-minute work time, check in, 2-minute work time, check in, maybe 5 minutes to clean out the plan. But the smaller the cycle, the more the more clear you are in building up all of the steps for a project.
Okay, great. So let's do one more coaching move. You had shared a couple of these in advance. Tell me about direct tells and probes. Let's do this one and then we'll wrap.
Sure. So direct tells is pretty much the world of ops, right? Like, do this by this time, needs to look like this, needs to be filed in this way. So that's direct tell. It's where we are directly telling a person what to do and how to do it. This is useful and a strategy and needs to happen. But when we have the opportunity to be growing our team, we want to limit the amount of direct tells that we're doing. We definitely want to use it if we know the person's skill isn't up to par. We will direct tell them how to do it, and ideally we'll model. We'll do it when time is a factor. We thought we planned 15 minutes to do a work time, but we don't have it. So it's going to be it's going to be direct tell of what needs to happen. Probe is also another term, would be check for understanding. So oftentimes the check for understanding that happens in meetings is, you got that? Okay, you
Right.
good? And then people are like, yeah, but I don't want to say, tell me back what you're hearing me say, because that feels infantile at different times. Or, what did you, say that back to me, and so the essence of that, say that back to me, I think is important. And the delivery is important. So the probe is basically a check for understanding. And what's important to know here as the coach is the first thing you want to do is get a check for understanding on the mental level, which is, my idea has been transmitted and transferred to the other human. And when they tell it back to me, it aligns on the mental level. And then ideally, your second probe will be around action or in the physical. So before we say organize the first floor curriculum closet, before we send the person, to go organize the first floor curriculum closet, we will ask some questions that get at their mental understanding. So tell me back what you're hearing me say, or how did you process when I said by grade level workbooks and then hard texts? So you're going to spend some probing on the mental level. And then you might say, tell me what supports you might need to make this happen. And if they're not able to say, I'm going to need a dolly to move the books from the third to the fourth floor, whatever, then you know that the production of what you've asked for is not going to meet your paint it done. So you want to use those probes, like first on the mental and then on the action. And ideally, if there's time, you're in that closet with the person showing them one model. Or you might say, I'll go down on Tuesday morning and I'll do first grade, take a photo, and you can build from there.
Love it.
Direct tell versus probe.
Very cool. Okay. Well, hopefully for those listening, you've got some opportunities that you can implement in your own upcoming meetings, one-on-ones, team meetings. And Jill, we really appreciate you sharing your expertise in the coaching space and your experience leading and supporting ops teams. As we come to a close, any recommended resources or books or other things we can point listeners to in the show notes?
Yes. So most of my work that I do is based on some frameworks from Dare to Lead, but also two texts, one called Crucial Conversations. They've got a really great framework and quiz you can take to see what your where you go to in the negative in your communications, what your strengths are, but what pitfalls you're most likely going to have. So that's Crucial Conversations. That's a free online quiz that you could take. And then the text kind of matches up with your weak points. And then there is Nonviolent Communication. I think that's a really great text for, while I use the frameworks in Crucial Conversation a lot in my coaching, what I like to say is conscious conversations are what move the work. And then the last thing that might be a little odd for ops people, but I think is really fun and important, is Kessler's book called The 5 Personality Types. And I think ops people should really listen or read the aggressor personality type and the rigid personality type, because these are, people who are strong in ops, this is a lot of their gift that they bring forward. So it really is helpful for learning about yourself and how you see the world and how you can then better kind of see some of your opportunities so that you can better work with your team.
Okay, well, we'll link to each of those in the show notes so folks can check those out. And then where can people learn more about you or connect with you, Jill, or your work?
My website is my first and last name, so jilldunchick.com. I am semi-active on LinkedIn. I go through spurts. I'll advertise things that are on there. I'll like people's things, but I'm not super active on LinkedIn. I'm active on my socials, but Facebook and Instagram, but it's a lot of the, Crew Dolly work and all the other things that I'm doing in life. But I think it's always fun to follow those pieces as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on, Jill. We really appreciate it. This was great.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Charter School Insider. This show is brought to you by BuyQ, the group purchasing organization specifically for charter schools. Want to learn how to maximize your school's purchasing power? Join together with thousands of other charter schools by visiting buyq.org/sign-up. BuyQ's purchasing program is free and has no obligations or commitments required. If you enjoyed today's episode, do us a favor and subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. If you have a question or feedback for us, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at podcast@byq.org. Thanks, and we hope you'll tune in for the next one.